Hi, this is Heather. Welcome to my kitchen. Several months ago, I promised to do a video on affinage, or affinage as it's sometimes referred to in English. So affinage is the art of taking care of your cheese. It comes from the French, and every cheese has its own regime. And I've actually got 4 cheeses here today, and they're all from my cave. And I've used a different form of affinage for each one. So we're going to kind of look, how do you care for cheese? So the first one that I'm going to show you is actually a queso de Mahon, and I've actually vacuum sealed it. And in our group, for the most part, a lot of people, that's the form that they're choosing. It's the easiest way to care for a cheese, especially when you're starting. When you're starting, your learning curve is really, really big. I mean, you're just trying to make a cheese. You're trying to make it without contamination, which can sometimes be a real challenge. Some of the videos out there, unfortunately, can lead you a bit astray, and so you wait 3 months and it's like, oh, this cheese really isn't that good. You're trying to fill your cave. So there's lots of pros for vacuum sealing, and so don't feel bad. Okay, if all your cheeses are vacuum sealed, I don't have a cow, so I don't have a steady access to raw milk. I actually usually buy my milk at the store, and it's pasteurized, homogenized, because that's what's available for me. And again, if that's what's available for you, that's fine. I don't want to really get hung up on raw versus pasteurized. I just want to talk about affinage today. So this cheese, you can kind of see it looks like there's a bit of bleeding, and that's because this is an oiled rind, and it's got paprika, Spanish paprika on the outside. So when you vacuum seal or vacuum pack a cheese, you don't have to worry about humidity. You just have to worry about the temperature. And that is a big help, because sometimes, and I can tell you, I'll go into the particulars in a minute, just trying to get the humidity in your cave sometimes can be a bit of a challenge to get it right. Actually, 3 cheeses here, and actually they all have different preferences for humidity. So you can see I've got them in ripening boxes, and again, I'll talk about that in a minute. So if you are if you're a new cheesemaker, or if this is what's easy to you, because the other thing about vacuum packing is you can really pack your cave full of cheese, much more than if you have things in ripening boxes. In ripening boxes, I can maybe squeeze 5 boxes in my cave, but really 4 is what fits comfortably. Okay, so enough about vacuum packing a cheese. So I use a double seal here, because that way, if one seal fails, you still have another. And the other thing that I usually do is I usually leave quite a lot of room, because especially if you're vacuum packing a cheese right after it has dried in your cave for a couple of days, or however long it needs to get dry. And I should say that cheese is on its own timeline. And you have to really read your cheese. If a recipe says dry for 3 days, that's just a suggestion, and it may be in your climate that it needs to dry for 5 days. So flipping twice a day, and a lot of us use a paper towel test, which we set the cheese on a paper towel in our cave, and then we leave it sit there for an hour or 2, and we go back and check. And if there's moisture on the paper towel, it means your cheese still needs to dry. And so then after that, you want to vacuum seal. But still, especially if your recipe isn't a great recipe, or you've had some things that have gone wrong and you have a bit of trapped whey, sometimes you want to leave a little bit of room, so that if you need to, if you end up with whey in the bag, you can take your cheese out, dry it off, You might even just dry it in the cave again for a couple of days and then put it back in and reseal it. And you can clean your bag and use your bag again if you've left enough room. So I left enough room for this, but I was pretty certain that I wouldn't need to do that. Now, the other thing that you can do is with vacuum sealing is that sometimes you can start a cheese in your cave, and then after you get a rind on it, you can vacuum seal it. And then if you want to, at the end, you can undo it from the vacuum seal, put it back in a box for a couple of weeks or a month, and you can restore that natural rind. Now, some cheeses, that's fine. For others, it doesn't work very well. So just as a note, you cannot vacuum seal blue cheese or bloomy rinds because you will destroy the nice bloom on them or the mold. Okay, I'm going to just set that out of sight. Okay, now I've got the other cheeses that I have here today. I'm going to actually show you this one first. So this is an Alpine Tome, and I'm actually doing them in a specific order because I don't want to contaminate this cheese with either what's gone on with this Hispanico or what's going on with this Morbier. So this is a Tome, and if you can see, it actually has a bit of mold growing on it. And it has some nice white mold, which I don't mind. I could keep that, but it also has a bit of just regular green mold. And like I said, it is very humid in right now. In fact, yesterday the humidity was 100%, even though it wasn't raining. And that has translated to a lot of humidity in the air, even inside the house and in my cave. So I monitor my cheese with these little hygrometers. And so from my phone, I can tell what the temperature is in the cave. And I can also tell if the humidity is too high, because it sends an alarm to my phone. And my phone has been going off this past week all the time because of the humidity. Now, if you're wondering, my hands are clean. I sanitized my hands just before we started. And so what do I do with this cheese? I need to clean it off. How am I going to do that? Now, I've got several options here. In this bottle here, and I really like these squeeze bottles. I use, this is just brine. So it has vinegar in it, calcium chloride, and salt. It's a saturated brine. And I put it in these nice squeeze bottles. So I can just squeeze a bit on the top. Now in this bag here, I've got some cheesecloth, just very cheap cheesecloth actually. And I've cut some pieces ready to take a piece and clean this cheese. So I just take and put a bit of brine, that stopper is going to get in my way here, on the top, and I can take my cheesecloth and I can just smear it around, and I can clean this cheese. Now sometimes you might have some really tough sort of things going on your cheese, and by the way, these cutting boards have been sanitized, and I actually have them stacked up because I have 3 different cheeses here, and that way I have a place to put my cheese. I'm just going to squeeze a bit on this cheesecloth so I can rub. Just going to do this side. Now sometimes you might have a bit of a place where, like I have right here, I have a bit of mold, and it's kind of not moving with just the cheesecloth. So I'm actually going to spray a little bit of vinegar on this sanitized toothbrush, and I'm just going to very lightly scrub it. And as you can see, it is, since I've got it there, I'm just going to do some of these other places. And so I'm just going to finish this off, and that way I can clean it and put it back into the cave. I left this a couple of days just so I would get some mold to clean off, because I've been kind of really keeping watch on this cheese, because like I said, my humidity has just been very, very difficult to control. I usually make most of my cheeses in the wintertime, just because maybe not so much going on. But all of these cheeses here that I'm caring for today are actually destined for a wedding that's happening in September, end of September, for my son, and I'm going to be making a bunch of cheeses for that. So yeah, this is just about done. Just do a few more brushes here in a few places. And I've got some paper towel here, and my paper towel is a brand new roll, and I'm going to then, once I get this all cleaned off, to a bit there that's just not wanting to move, I will just take plain paper towel from a new roll, and I'm just going to dry this off. Now, interestingly, with this Tome, I kind of did a bit of a mistake on the pressing. So I'm hoping that it's going to be okay. For some reason, I thought I had more weight on than I did. And so got a bit of pink going on here. That's probably bee linens. I wouldn't care if it had a little bit of bee linens on it. But some people don't like that kind of a rind. And so, yeah, this is all nice and dry. Now, if I just changed the mats that these are on, but I'm going to show you what I have. So you've often seen these kind of mats being used. And the other thing that I use is, this is like a dish drain protector. It's made by Rubbermaid, and I can get these at the dollar store, and I cut them up, and it just gives a bit of circulation underneath. So back that cheese goes. That's the Tome. So this particular cheese, I'm using brine, and the reason I can use brine on this cheese is because it doesn't have bee linens. Vinegar, bee linens doesn't like vinegar. So if you treat something with vinegar, you can kill your bee linens in that place. Sometimes it'll come back fine, but it doesn't like bee linens. So bee linens doesn't like vinegar. So that is that Tome. Now, I'm going to quickly wash my hands. And dry them off. And now we'll look at this next cheese, which is this Morbier. Now, this is a bee linens cheese, and so I have over here, I'm going to just put this back in there, get rid of these things. I have a garbage right down there, and I'm going to get a different board. And now we can care for this bee linens. So this is a special bee linens brine that I've made that has bee linens, salt, and boiled water. And I'm just going to actually just give it a shake to get the salt, everything mixed in. So this is 1 cup of water, boiled water, 1 tablespoon of salt, and New England Cheese Company says a pinch of bee linens, but actually I put in a little more than a pinch because nothing was happening. So I'll put this into this bowl here, and then I've got another piece of cheesecloth, and I'm going to clean this now. So again, just dipping in and giving it a scrub. And this is because I was fighting with my humidity, actually got a little bit of just green mold on it. And I may actually have to take another brush and clean this. So this one I'm just doing the sides first and cleaning it off. Not too aggressive, but you can see that there is some green on there from my cheesecloth. And I should have got another piece of cheesecloth cut. So I'm just going to dry my hands, and I'm going to get a pair of scissors and cut another piece of cheesecloth. Okay, I'm back with more cheesecloth and also a toothbrush. I sanitize this toothbrush, goes through the dishwasher, and then I put it in a bag after it's dry. Then before I use it, I usually spray some vinegar on it, but because this is bee linens, I did spray the vinegar on it, but then I rinsed it off with some boiled water. And so now I'm just going to, again, kind of clean some of these stubborn places with this toothbrush, just because I want to just get it a bit cleaner. Now this is a Morbier and it has an ash line in there. So just remember that sometimes what looks to be a bit of mold may not be mold at all. It's just the ash line, like that place right there. So yeah, interesting. The mold was mainly around this outside that didn't have this good a bee linens coverage as the ends did. So I'm just going to again wash this. Just give it a little scrub here with these little edges. And with bee linens, you can also, if your hands are nice and sanitized, sometimes the easiest way is to just put it on with your hands. So want to just take a little bit of this off so it's not too wet, but with bee linens you do want to. Just going to actually just put a little bit more on there, and there. That is this Morbier. And we'll get rid of the garbage there. And now we have our last cheese that we're going to look at. Just going to spray my hands again. Put the lid back on this one. Now you notice that I've put the cheese and also the humidity that it needs. especially when you've got two cheeses like this Tome and this Morbier that look exactly alike. Sometimes I put different colored lids on them so I know, but that often my memory isn't great, so then I forget. So this is a Hispanico, and there's no confusing that this cheese. I'm going to do a little insertion with this cheese because this is like a manchego, except for it's made with cow's milk. So they call that Hispanico. And it has this special mold that used to be baskets, but now they have plastic molds that mimic that kind of basket weave on the outside, on the ends and the top. This cheese is traditionally just kind of left to its own devices. Now, I'm not quite that brave. It was a little bit scary for me just to, the first time that I made it, just to leave it because it goes green. That's what happens when cheese molds. It goes green. But eventually the green sort of dies out, and you are left with this lovely sort of brown, nice color. And so how I cared for that was I used this brush. Now, this brush is just like a shoe brush. And when I first got it, I washed it very, very well with soap and water and let it air dry. And then I sprayed it with vinegar and dried it on some paper towel till most of the vinegar was gone. Now, horsehair is kind of getting a bit of a bad name right now. For years, it's actually been used often when applying a bee linens brine onto a cheese. They have these big brushes that they will use, and they were often made out of horsehair. Just recently, they're saying that it can be a biohazard, but I don't use this wet. I only use it dry. And so as this cheese kind of turned green, every week or so, I would brush it down, just dry brush it down, and eventually it got this color. Now, last week I actually oiled this with some olive oil, and this one I'll just keep watch on the humidity and keep watch that it doesn't turn any more green. And I'm not sure what color this actually will look on camera, because sometimes the color that I see and the color that gets picked up from the camera can be different, but it's kind of a nice, warm, walnutty brown. If you buy Manchego or Hispanico today, a lot of it has been mass produced. In order to get this color, they actually paint it. And but this is how it was traditionally done. So that's the fourth of our different types of rind. So this one, dry brushing and maybe oiling. This one over here was just cleaning it with brine and keeping the rind fairly clean most of the time. This one is our bee linens one. So we want that nice orangey mold to get on there so it becomes a bit of a stinky cheese. And then our vacuum sealed cheese. So that's our 3 ways of doing affinage. Now, I was just going to, if you notice, I have this thing of salt here. Now, sometimes, especially, you might get a bit of mold that is not working to use your toothbrush, and you might need a bit of grit. So you can just sprinkle a bit of salt, and either with your brush or with your finger, you can kind of work that salt. And that is also another way to clean mold off your cheese. I hope that this has been helpful. I'm going to change the camera around so that you can see what my cave looks like, because I know that some of you will be asking, what is a cheese cave? And my cheese cave is actually a repurposed wine fridge. So yeah, in the comments below, I'll answer any questions that you have. There's just not a lot of information out there for home cheesemakers on how to care for these cheeses. If you go to New England Cheese Company, they have affinage directions with their cheeses, and that's been very, very helpful for me. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have them as a resource. And a lot of it is just, I started with just doing one cheese, and that was all that I had to care for. The rest I was vacuum packing. And as I got more confidence, then I started doing other cheeses. I have to say that doing a bee linens washed rind, that was the first one that I did actually, was a bee linens. It was an Appenzeller. And for that cheese, I made my own sort of mixture out of homemade pear wine that we have a pear tree in our backyard, and a bunch of the botanicals in my garden, herbs as well as weeds that I sanitized, and then I steeped in this pear wine. I added a little bit of vodka to up the alcohol content because I wanted to make sure that it was quite strong, and a bit of salt in that, as well as in the brine itself, and that's what I washed it with. And having to wash your cheese every few days, or once it got a bit of a rind on it, once a week, is a good way to help take away the mold. I did it in the winter, so I wasn't struggling so much with the humidity. So that was my first natural rind cheese, and and just it's really it adds a whole uniqueness to your cheese doing a natural rind. Vacuum sealing your rind is basically sort of like the inside of your cheese, but when you do a natural rind, you do get a bit more flavor profiles happening. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they may not be so good, but yeah, like I said, hopefully this has been helpful for you. And yeah, I just encourage you to try to do some natural rinds. I realized that I really didn't talk about taking care of your ripening boxes, so I'm going to just add a little bit more here. Depending on the humidity of your cheese, you will probably have condensation forming in your boxes. That's why I love these little hygrometers, because it gives me an indication when your humidity creeps over 90%, you will probably need to wipe your boxes out almost daily, because you don't want that condensation to drip onto your box. So just with a dedicated roll of paper towel, you can wipe out the insides of your box. I usually take and put my cheese onto a sanitized cutting board, and then I wipe the bottom of the box. I often will spray it with vinegar and just wipe that out again. And your cave really needs to have air circulation, and so some fridges do have air circulation, and so that's not a problem that the air is refreshed. Mine doesn't. I don't think it has a circulation inside it at all, and so yeah, you want your cheese. Your cheese does need air, and so putting your cheese into a ripening box and just kind of forgetting about it, even if it says you can flip it once every 5 days. I really find almost daily I am taking care of these cheeses, at least wiping out the ripening box. Now, this bee linens cheese, I actually have it on elevated with some chopsticks, and I usually put the chopsticks just so that these days anyway, that there's a bit of air circulation coming in, so that the top isn't really meeting the bottom in a tight seal, and that I found is really helpful and that's the way that I'm regulating humidity. I know that there are some boxes that have like a flip thing, and that might be sufficient, but it might not be sufficient. So usually the way that we are regulating humidity is how tightly we put the lid on. When you're drying your cheese initially, depending on the humidity of your cave, you may not need a top on, or yeah, you may not need a top on the bottom as well. And the other thing too is, depending on the cheese, sometimes doing it the opposite. I have the cheese sitting on the lids, but sometimes having the cheese sitting in the box and having the lid on might work better for you. It doesn't matter. Whichever is working best in keeping your humidity the most regulated. So yeah, so yeah, I've got this. Two of these have chopsticks, sanitized disposable chopsticks on them, just to get it up and get a bit more circulation in it. This one is fine just sitting on the two different layers that I have. You can also use sushi mats. Some places sushi mats are cheap. Some places they're expensive, and so it just depends. And they also they will mold. But I have to say, if you're doing a bloomy rind like camembert or brie, having a sushi mat, those I actually do age on sushi mats, because you can very carefully, just one piece of the bamboo at a time, peel it off your bloomy rind without destroying the surface of it. And so yeah, so hopefully that's just a little more addition. So remembering to wipe your boxes out. Sometimes I'll look, the humidity is fine, and I'll just take the lid off, and even just in the cave, just give it a bit of air circulation movement, and then put the box back on if there's no condensation. And then once a week, I usually change out my boxes. I change out my mats, and put all clean ones in, and start again fresh for the week with a new box, a new mat. And but if I had a cheese that for some reason went really crazy with green mold, and I didn't want any green mold on it, I would be changing that mat out right away. So again, the next little bit, I'm just going to show you what the cheese cave looks like, so you just get a bit of an idea on the boxes in a cheese cave. This is the natural rind development of that Saffron Hispanico that I was showing you, and this is what it looked like when it came out of the brine. And then slowly it starts to get mold. That was probably about 2 weeks in. And then here's another shot coming up a week later, starting to go green. And then another week, the green is starting to slowly die off. You can see a bit of white coming, and then it gets a bit whiter there. And then after I oiled it, it looked like this. Okay, so this is my cave. It's actually a wine fridge. I got it secondhand on Facebook Marketplace for a really good price, actually. And let's just take a look on the inside. So there you can see I've got my Morbier, my Tome there on the top shelf. The Hispanico and the Queso de Mahon is on the next shelf, and then the bottom shelf I have my brine. Got some cheese that's actually aging in vacuum packs, and just little wedges, and yeah, and the bee linens, and my just my brine solution that I use for washing there. And you can see I have the little thermometer, the hygrometer thermometers in the front, so I can actually see it if I'm in my kitchen and not looking at my phone. And that is my cave. My cave, you can set the temperature quite easily, and I've discovered that what it says on the outside isn't necessarily what's happening inside, so I rely on those thermometers for that.